We're doing great.
Good. Hey, so today we're going to talk about spiral dynamics, a framework for how we can understand values and shifts in value systems. And then we're also going to look at the tie to um, morality in the context of the Enneagram, which I think provides a good point for that, and then maybe talk a little bit about who gets to define, what morality is and who's controlling that narrative, and then we can just like look at that in the context of what's going on, especially here in the United States right now. We'll look at both the perspectives from spiral dynamics and from the Enneagram. So I think people probably aren't super familiar with both of these systems. Just briefly, spiral dynamics is a relatively new system that was developed by a woman named Claire Grave, who's a developmental psychologist who studied, different values systems and how different communities have different values. And she created this framework for understanding that. And one of the really interesting aspects about this is that each new value system solves a problem with the previous value system, and so every value system is going to have pros and cons, and at some point the cons of the value system become untenable for the community, and they evolve into a new different value system.
Yes.
And but that doesn't mean that the old values aren't still in the community, and so this framework essentially is pulling all of these values up in this spiral, and each new system solves problems with the older values, but those older values are still there. So there's always this tension between newer values and older values. Does that make sense?
Yes. Oh, absolutely.
So let's just very quickly go through the values, and you'll recognize a lot of this. So I'll start at the bottom. The beige value system is just basic survival instincts. It's like, I need food, I need water, I need clothing. It's just like your basic needs. And when you don't have your basic needs met, then your values are to essentially meet your basic needs.
Yes.
But then as you get to the point where you have your basics need met, then you can start to have more group or tribal based value systems where you're now, taking care of your tribe.
Yes.
And then as that community gets big, and how big are tribes? It's like the human brain can only accommodate, what is it, something like 140 people. But then once you get beyond a group of 140 people, then you evolve into new value systems with strong leaders,
Okay.
and you end up with these kind of strong man value systems where you are looking for a leader who can kind of take the group in different directions, and also help you protect yourself from other groups if they come into conflict. But that can get, and we could think of this kind of as maybe feudal societies where we have
Okay.
lots of lords and dukes, and each has
Yes.
their castle, and then they're peasants and they're fighting each other, and it gets a little chaotic and unpredictable and not very comfortable. So then we evolve into more of a rules-based society where you have these bigger, stronger authorities that are establishing rules and norms. And then, everybody agrees to kind of live within those. So you can think of that kind of as maybe the evolution of the church, where you start to impose an institution that comes up with some rules, commandments, maybe the 10 commandments are like rules, and that people start to agree that people would live by these rules. And then you start to develop a rules-based rather than a strongman based society, where what I say goes. I make the rules, right? Now, but and each one of these value systems, they have a color associated with them. So the red value system is more the strongman value system. The blue value system is more the rules-based institutional value system. And then, but that rules-based society can get a little stodgy and stifling. And so we come up with this orange, where it values more innovation and competition, and it's more people more of an opportunity to express themselves. I think in Western culture, this really emerged during the Enlightenment, after a long period of mostly, controlled by the church.
Okay.
Then you get this kind of backlash to the church, and you get into the Enlightenment, which values science and progress rather than just sticking to the rules. Okay. But the problem with this, and I would say that I live in Silicon Valley, and the Silicon Valley culture is definitely an orange culture.
Yes.
Valuing the innovation. It's move fast and break stuff, including the rules, right? The rules of the blue value system, we're going to break those rules. We're going to do stuff our way. So so that's kind of the orange. But the problem with the orange system is that you end up with very high levels of inequality, because even though it's meritocratic, the wealth tends to flow in certain directions.
Okay.
And it starts to accumulate there.
Okay.
And it starts to build up barriers for others to access the resources and the education and all the things that would allow a true meritocracy. And so the response to that is this green value system, which would value more equality, spreading resources equally, collaboration, higher values on ecology and the planet. And so those are the green values. And so that's kind of just a quick rundown on what this framework is. Does this all make sense?
Oh yeah, yeah. I can definitely see the evolution of each one of the systems and how they came to be, as well as see the tension that arises in each one of them. Yes.
Right. And how we are living all of these, right?
Yes,
In our
absolutely.
society, we are living all of these values all at once.
Yes.
And there is that, like you said, that tension between the different values. So now that we know that, I want to just flip over to a discussion on morality, because I think underpinning values are morality. And we change our values based on our morals.
Mm.
And that's kind of what, in my opinion, that's what's driving it.
Okay.
So you know what is the starting point of morality? And I think the Enneagram has an answer for that.
Mm.
Now, I'm not going to do the deep dive into the Enneagram. I've done that in previous talks. So, but I'll just say that most people know the Enneagram as a personality system.
Right.
But
Okay.
the Enneagram, the types are numbers, and they are numbers for a reason. And it's because it's defining the flow of how these dynamics emerge when groups collaborate. They start with one, and then they move around to nine, and they're always moving around
Okay.
like a spiral. But there's all that motion of moving around the circle like a clock, 1 through 9, back to 1. And the dynamic for type 1, sometimes the personality is called the perfectionist, but they are keenly aware of fairness. Fairness really drives the one, and they see, when things aren't fair, and then they say, hey, that's not right. It shouldn't be like that. It should be like this. Right. And I think that's really the starting point of morality.
Mm.
And even a childlike understanding. Kids are very good. Kids have an innate sense of morality. And they know when things aren't fair. Hey, that's not fair. And so I think that really is, the Enneagram says that is kind of the starting point. And I think it's a good starting point to look at how these values change through this sense of fairness and our reaction to it. And um, and another thing that drives the type 1 is guilt, right? Because we know when, we aren't being fair, and that kind of drives our sense of guilt. And so, which is a very strong motivating factor for us. And so you end up with this, and even in like judicial systems, right, that are defining what is right and what is wrong, the word they use is guilty. You're guilty of not doing the right thing. So ones have this innate sense of what's right and wrong, and they also feel guilt, I think, most strongly of all of the Enneagram types. So I think it's an interesting tie-in with the Enneagram.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. See where there's some overlay. Yes.
What are your thoughts on how, morality, when you think about morality, does the fairness strike you as kind of the starting point?
Oh, absolutely. I think that harkens back to your comment about children.
Right.
How they have that innate, we are all born with an innate sense of, hey, that doesn't feel right. And then we learn the language, how to articulate that. But there is this sense of, hey, this is not fair, even with small children.
Right.
So yes, there is something that starts very that we are born with
Right.
when it comes down to the morality piece.
Right. I want to switch over to who gets to define what's fair.
Okay.
Now humans are, while kids have this innate sense of right and wrong,
Right.
and what's fair and what's unfair, we humans also, as we grow older, we absorb ideas, and those ideas start to influence what our sense of right and wrong is as well. And so, the person who can control the narrative gets to define what is right and what is wrong, right? And you can think about this maybe in terms of, we talked about that blue value system, that that I look at the church as definitely a blue institution, defining what is right and what is wrong, and then people living by those values, based on what that the church is defining as what's fair and what's not fair, right? So, when when we have, the response of our society to growing inequality, that emerged in that orange value system, the response was we need more equality.
Okay.
And that's that green value system.
Right.
We need to move more towards the green value system to make sure that everybody is being treated fairly.
Fairly. Yes.
Right? But the orange value system, which has become a dominant value system and has accumulated a lot of wealth, power, and resources, they can reshape what is being considered fair. And I would say that this backlash to diversity, equity, inclusion, diversity, equity, inclusion is almost definitionally a green value, right? And so the response from the people in the orange was to attack that, and
Yes.
redefine it, and say, how the rules that were being put in place to enforce DEI, let's try to be more inclusive, let's try to spread research, they redefine that as being unfair. That's not fair. And they used the morality of fairness to attack DEI, which was trying to make things more fair.
Yes. All right.
Right. And the term white aggrievement.
Yes.
Where you're white people thinking that things are being taken away from them, and that is not fair. Right. And when you look at this slide here, this ecosystem of right-leaning voices, this is one of the main tactics they use, is to say how it's unfair that so many resources are being diverted away from you white people, and then that activates the white morality to push back on that green value system. That's kind of how I see it.
Okay. Yeah. with respect to the diagram that you have there, definitely we see that most of the those conversations with regards to those leading, the conversation centers around what is being taken away.
Right.
And definitely purporting to put morality boundaries, borders in place to
Right.
say this is the way it should be.
Right.
That's the way I see it. If you're listening to those voices, the ones that you have listed there in the red,
Right.
they are purporting to say, "Hey, this is happening, or this is being done to you, um, as well as this is the way it should be."
Right. Right.
Okay.
Exactly. And so, you know, the United States is interesting as a country because we have a First Amendment. So the First Amendment protects speech, and and everybody has the right, given by our Constitution, to free speech. Not every country has a free speech right, but we do. And so if you want to control the narrative in a country that has free speech, how do you do that? And here are some of the things that we see now is how these people who have accumulated vast amounts of wealth are buying up media companies
Hmm.
to control the narrative. So like Elon Musk bought X, Jeff Bezos bought the Washington Post. So you're seeing these people who have developed vast amounts of wealth based on that meritocratic orange system, now going in and buying up media companies to be able to control the narrative and define what is fair and what is not fair. And the little diagram here on the right, I know it's hard to read, but this is the top 25 politics and news outlets on X, the X platform. The biggest one is Elon Musk himself. So he dominates that platform. His views dominate that platform. Other ways that politicians will control the media. For instance, President Trump, he doesn't necessarily own a media outlet, but he is very good at controlling it, and he makes them obedient by giving them or taking away access, or suing them for libel, and creating a lot of cost and expense if they say anything against him. And so it just tamps down that message. There was a the pioneer for this, I don't know if you remember, was Peter Thiel.
Oh, yes.
Mm-hmm. He set out to take out was it Grokster, I think was, Gawker, sorry. Because they were doing reporting on him that he didn't like. And so he sued them and was able to put them out of business. And, and he's another one of these, tech billionaires who, accumulated vast amounts of wealth. And now he can just use his wealth to, take out and control the media. And that case set a template for the right now to threaten and control other media outlets so they can, maintain control of the narrative. So, and, another one, of course, is you just flood the media with disinformation, so then you stop knowing what's true and what's not true, and everything is just like, okay, I guess I'll make up my own truth. So we lose this sense of truth, and and we have a president who, exemplifies this. You can't trust anything he says. He's constantly, saying untruths, and so it just creates this environment where nothing is true anymore. You don't know what to believe. And then, when these owners, because ostensibly, we can, make this video and we can promote these ideas out on social media. But if the owners of those those media institutions or media outlets don't like what we're saying, then they can demote our content, and so that it just doesn't get disseminated. And so they have control now over the platforms, Facebook, X, all social media, and are able to promote things and demote things. One of the things that I'm very passionate about is getting accurate climate change and global warming information out. And it is so hard to do that in this environment because all of that content gets flagged and demoted. And so all you hear is the greenwashing comments and not the truth about where we are in global warming. So does this make sense? Does this resonate?
Oh, absolutely. I'm following with who's controlling the narrative and how they're going about doing it. Yeah, and even some of the reasons as to why they're doing it. Yes.
Right. So, so those are my thoughts on the, the different value systems. I see this tension between the green and the orange now. I see I see the tension between the green equality-based value system and the orange meritocratic
Yes.
value system. We see, how, even the Trump presidency really harkens back to this red strongman value system where what I say goes, and he is trying to dismantle the rules-based system that the U.S. has become the model for the world with our Constitution and our judicial system. He's trying to dismantle that rules-based system and take us back to the strongman value system. So we see all of these different values coming into play, and
Yes.
how each one of those is using that sense of right and wrong and what's fair and what's unfair in trying to promote their value system.
Yeah, yeah. No, I follow you with regards to the spiraling dynamics and where we are as it's being played out today, where we can identify those value systems who are at war right about now. Yeah, sometimes literally at war with each other on that system and everything. The one thing that I would offer up is as leaders, having this information help us with our ability to lead through these, if we can determine within our ecosystem where what we are facing, what tensions we see that are being brought about, those that are somewhat intimate, the value systems that are intimate in proximity to us. How do we lead through those situations? How do we lead through those circumstances, if you will? with
Right.
this spiraling dynamics. And I also want to make sure that there is a body of work out there that somewhat does not follow, or I don't know if does not follow is the right way to characterize it, but um, does not recognize, but maybe the work that's being done through spiraling dynamics.
Mm.
So really and truly just want to make sure you put that on the table as we
Yeah.
continue to discuss how we can um, characterize what we're facing, what
Right.
we're seeing as it's being played out.
Right. We should also mention, that even though these narratives are out in the media that are pushing back on DEI, we as a society and we as a culture recognize that we are in a time of gross inequality, and that people don't think that's fair, and they want to build a fairer society that more equally shares resources among all of us. And we're a lot of this conversation has been centered around DEI lately, and I think it's really interesting, to see, the companies which have decided to, go along more with this right wing, I'll call it, narrative of, okay, we're going to, bring it back and pull back from DEI, versus no, we value DEI as a core part of our culture, and we want to maintain that sense of equality and diversity and inclusion in our corporate values, our green corporate values, and then how society is deciding with their dollars, which of these. So they're kind of voting with their dollars, which of these value systems that they want to promote. And so you can see, for instance, Target, I think, is a good example, because their first reaction was, to pull back from DEI and to say, okay, we're going to remove DEI from our mission statement and all of our website, and then the Target customers started to boycott Target, and they lost a lot of revenue when they did that.
Yeah, yeah.
And so then they realize, oh, okay, well, maybe, even though all the narratives in the media say that we want to move back from DEI, maybe the society itself actually wants it. And so they flip-flopped. They said, oh, never mind, we're going to include DEI. And this is just very recently. And now the people who are more in line with the anti-DEI values are organizing to boycott Target.
Yes.
And and the anti-DEI, I was mentioning earlier, like the blue value system is it's very, there's a lot of religious organizations that I would characterize more in that blue value system. And so we are seeing and they objected less to pulling back from DEI, and they object. The blue value system objects to moving towards the green value system. Some do. And so now those religious organizations in that blue value system are organizing to boycott Target because they're trying to move into green. So this is just kind of a way to understand these dynamics. Using spiral dynamics, you can kind of understand and see these tensions that arise as these different value systems come into conflict, and Target just put themselves right in the crosshairs of this conflict.
Absolutely. They put themselves right in the laboratory so that we can see the movement, the evolutions between between value systems as they move, the reasons why, and again, the tensions that play themselves out when you move from one to the other. And I think we mentioned that as the value systems evolve and they begin to be front and center, they still bring with them some of the things from the previous value system.
Right.
Yeah, and they continue to play themselves out as well. So at the former protest, yes, with the boycotting, those are the tensions that we see within the value systems as they begin to evolve, and one takes center stage and one recedes. So yeah, I think that as leaders too, when you think about morality and you think about values, I think you too have to be conscious about where you sit with your morals and your values too, personally and professionally. So it impacts your ability to lead, knowing that there's an evolution with regards to the value systems, and different entities are pulling levers to impact that. Those different entities are pulling levers that impact the evolution of the value systems.
Mm-hmm.
And who has the narrative, so to speak, who right now, majority of the narrative with regards to what we are seeing and playing out. There is some tension that we can see with the protests against those narratives. So armed with this information, I think we as leaders need to make sure that we understand self-awareness, where we stand, which is going to be a big influence on how we lead.
Absolutely. Well, Twiana, this was such a great conversation. Thank you so much. And do you have any final thoughts or?
I think that we're living in a time where we see the laboratories beginning to play themselves out. And the more we as leaders grab onto our ability to understand and become aware of what's happening, it's only going to help us as leaders continue to grow. And I would hope continue to lead effectively.
Yeah. And hopefully some of this information gives people an understanding and a framework from which to understand these
Yes.
dynamics, and understand where those tensions are going to be in our culture, and then also with your business based on
Yes.
who your customers are,
Absolutely.
and help you better navigate these interesting times.
Yes.
All right.
Thank you.